Welcome to our last section in this title where we're going to explore our last major technology, which is MongoDB. Install MongoDB, create a MongoDB database. We're going to differentiate and understand the difference between a database, collection, document, where we're going to go ahead and insert documents, add content into our database. And we're also going to look how to find things, including complex ways to find things. And we're going to wrap things up by learning how to delete all of these new terms that we've talked about, which are documents, collections, and databases. We won't be over there because there's a few more topics. One is we're going to take, well, it's going to be a long video, the last video, where we're going to take a spin on a MongoDB driver. And by the way, we're going to understand the differences between a driver and a database and take a look at creating a simple application using MongoDB driver in Node.js. With that said, without mouthful of content that we're going to be covering in this section, let's jump right into the first lecture of this section. And in this first lecture, we're going to go ahead and install MongoDB. But before we do that, I want to take a second to talk about NoSQL. Traditionally, in server-side languages, databases were planned, structured, and quite complex. If you take a look at MySQL, there is a big learning curve there. Beyond the fact that it's very rigid, and whenever you want to make a change to it, it demands a lot of changes within your application as well. The concept of NoSQL comes from the idea of, instead of structuring your data, wouldn't it be nice to be able to dynamically save data, whatever data you want, manipulate and change it without needing to pre-plan a structure in advance? What that gives you is the capability of changing structures and evolving your structure as you're going on without needing to make major changes with different languages and configurations that you're probably less familiar with that would demand you to involve more people. Beyond the fact that this is a really fast and good solution for a lot of usages online. Namely, when you have a lot of content related directly to a certain user, for example, where you don't need to go through and don't want to go through 100 different databases or tables and columns to fetch and gather all those informations. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and install the MongoDB. Now, the installation process is different than all the installations we've done within NPM. And the reason is because MongoDB is a database. It is not a Node.js interpretation. It is an actual database, an actual application that needs to live on its own sphere. Once we have that application installed on its own sphere, then we'll also install through NPM a driver that knows how to control and manipulate MongoDB. So you need to make a very clear separation. So make sure if you ever go into the documentations of anything to realize if you're reading documentations of a driver, which means it's something that is driving and controlling MongoDB, versus documentation that are directly for MongoDB, which are two completely different things that could be very easily confusable if you don't differentiate between those two. With that said, let's go ahead and install MongoDB. So you're watching this video, that means you're running on a Mac. Now, even if you're not joined into this video, the remainder of the video, unless you really do want to and then just skip on to the next video, just make sure you go into our attached documentation and go and install MongoDB. That's what you want to do in this video, in this section, before you move on to the next video. So let's go ahead. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to just go directly into the MongoDB installation guide, which you have a tutorial and all this information. It's really easy. You're going to have that also in the links attached to this chapter. Now, before I'm going to start installing MongoDB, I need to have Brew installed on a Mac. Now, Brew, and I'm just typing brew.sh, that is their site. Brew is basically a package manager that is a package manager for Mac. Just like we have NPM that is a package manager for Node.js, then Homebrew is basically a package, it's a package manager for your operating system, enabling you to add a lot of things that exist in a Linux operating system that are not available on a Mac. If you've worked on any Linux device, which I hope you have, as we saw in previous chapters, we were working with Yum on the server on Linux, and other servers on other Linux devices, if they're not CentOS, will have a different type of package manager. So in this case, we're basically creating a package manager. Now, it's really easy to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this whole beautiful link, And I'm just going to go right into terminal. In my terminal, I'm going to click on enter, put that in there, and let it start installing Homebrew. It's going to tell me what files, where it's going to add it. I'm going to click on return because I'm fine with it installing it. I'm going to go ahead and put a note of my password, my admin, or my user password more accurately, and it's going to go through the process of installing Homebrew. Once I have Homebrew installed, I'm going to have access to Brew. Now, Brew is the I would say Brew is comparable to NPM. Only Brew installs things globally for our operating system, kind of similar to what NPM does, but this is specifically focused on packages that are for Linux, packages to make things work on your operating system. So for example, why you might be asking yourself, why am I not installing MongoDB directly using NPM? Because NPM only installs packages, and these packages relate to Node.js. Contrary to that, MongoDB is a database. It could be used by Node.js, but it could be used by your operating system. It could be used by PHP. It could be used by many other languages. And MongoDB has drivers, which we're going to talk about them in the next lecture. And with those drivers, it enables us to then interact between our different languages with MongoDB. Now, the reason why we're learning MongoDB is because MongoDB interface, it stores information in JSON, which is basically JavaScript. Okay, with that said, I want to check that I have your brew, so I'm just going to check brew v, and I'm just going to see if I'm going to get some sort of a response, and we can see that we have the version of brew. Beautiful. In general, you don't really have to worry too much about this. The version of Homebrew right now is 0.9.9, but what I want to show you is brew, just like NPM, updates. So I could update all the applications on Brew or update itself as well, and it's going to go through to check as if there is anything that needs to get refreshes and updates. If there is anything, it will update it, and if not, it's going to keep it the way it is. With that said, let's go ahead and also install now MongoDB. And MongoDB, we'll go this way. Is it DB or D? I'm not sure. Let's try MongoDB, and if we get an error, that means it's MongoD. So it's going to search, it's looking for MongoDB. Hopefully, if it doesn't find anything, it looks like it did, so that's what we type. Yeah, so brew, install MongoDB. Beautiful. So we're going to give it a few seconds for it to complete its installation, and I'm going to tell you in the meantime that one of the things that MongoDB needs is a folder where it's going to actually have all of its, I would say, where it's going to have its database itself. Now, by default, it expects the database to be in the data-/db folder. If that folder doesn't exist, MongoDB won't work. So for us to make it work, what we want to do is we're not going to change those default configurations. If you want to, you're more than encouraged to dig deeper into the documentation of MongoDB. But what I want to do is I'm going to keep it the way it is, and I'm going to go and create an mkey. I'm going to create a directory, and I'm going to make sure that I could create multiple directories because data doesn't exist yet and DB doesn't exist. Notice that I'm putting here a trailing because I want to put this in the folder, in the root folder of everything. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Notice that I have permission denied, so I'm going to go ahead and use here a sudo, making sure that our root supposedly is doing it. I'm going to go ahead and type my password and type my password. Beautiful. So I just created the directory. Now, my only problem that I have now, even though I've created the directory, is I don't have access to this directory because it's a directory of the root. So what I want to do next is I want to go to sudo change owner, chown, and I'm going to recursively, even though there's nothing inside there, but just for the sake of if there was anything inside there, we want to make sure that we are going to change everything to be us, and I'm basically saying who am I. I'm putting here a function to retrieve who's the username right now, and I'm going to go ahead and set that folder to be our folder, my folder, Ben Fala. And if I go ahead and save this, that's it. That's all I had to do to configure and get MongoDB to be installed and running. Now, this is the Mac instructions. If you're working on Windows, if you're working on a Linux, make sure to follow the documentation that's provided, the links that are provided with the appendixes of this chapter. In this lecture, we've installed MongoDB, and now we're ready to start working with it.